everybody. I'm PJ Kwong, and this is the Sports Clamor podcast presented by Community. Today's guest, I am so excited to talk to because I'd like to talk to her anyway, all of the time. But this way, at least I have a real excuse for her to show up. I am talking about Olympian, World Cup medalist, and all around communicator and just photographer and really everything. Kelly VanderBeek, I want to say thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, PJ. It's always a pleasure to see you. I always say a good broadcaster is somebody you want to sit down and just have a beer with or a coffee, and that's you. It's the person I want to sit down and have a coffee with. So let's dive right in.
The goal would be to have the coffee and then it lasts long enough to go into beer time, but that's a situation for another day. That's for darn sure. So I want to talk about loosely speaking, the Sports Clamor podcast is examining people's sports perspective and sports stories. So what I've noticed, and the reason why I went to Community to say, hey, you know what? I think there's lots of meat on this bone, and it's the idea of growing grassroots sports in Canada and what will happen to various sectors if that doesn't happen. So, I'm going to be talking to athletes. I've been talking to insiders in media. I'm talking to, Olympians like you. And I'm just curious about all of this. So let's start way back in the beginning. You were born in Kapuskasing, which, by the way, was home to a very famous skating school way back in the day before you were born. But Kapuskasing, but you called Kitchener home when you started to ski. Am I right?
You've got that exactly right. I first learned how to ski and threw on the boards, first cross country and then downhill in Kapuskasing. Rainy Lake Ski Club was where I learned. My first and earliest memory on skis is trying to just hold on to the rope toe as it lifted my feet off the ground to get to the top. And then we moved to Kitchener Waterloo and Chicopee Ski Club, amazing community center that introduces the sport to so many people. That's where I started racing. And boy, am I ever glad that was there and that the structure was there in order to give me that opportunity.
I think that, so basically you were on skis around the time that you could walk. Let's put it that way. Very, very young skier. What drew you to Alpine versus some of the other disciplines?
It was more just influence, right? You're a kid and you're just doing what your parents signed you up for. I'm from a family of 4 kids. I have an older sister, 2 younger brothers. And my mom grew up skiing and she had visions of just ski holidays with her family, right? It really is about finding ways to ensure that for your entire lives, you can connect and do stuff you love together, whether it's golf, whether it's skiing. They're really good ways to sit on a chairlift and you kind of, your kids are stuck with you. They got to talk to you, or you're in a golf cart or something of that nature. So my mom always wanted that. So she wanted in Shirelle skied. But at Chicopee, she got off the chairlift and she literally remembers her first time getting off the chairlift, wrangling 4 little kids around her. The head coach of the club back then, Peter Basson, he came over and was just like, lady, what are you doing with all these kids? Oh, they have to be in the racing program. Like, that's what they do. And so it was just like, okay, this Swiss guy is yelling at me. I guess I got to put my kids in racing.
When the Swiss guys yell, that's what happens. People just fall into line. So did all 4 of you ski, like downhill racing?
We all skied. We all raced a little bit. Really, 3 of us did. My youngest brother never did. The boys, it was kind of understood. They just play hockey. It wasn't necessarily a choice. And then for my sister and I, we did lots of different sports. We all did, in fact. But it was really soccer and skiing that I had to pick between. And so I picked skiing at a 12-year-old brain who knows what you're thinking at that time. In the end, obviously, it was a good decision for myself, but I still loved soccer, and I continued all the way through high school and would have continued collegiately had skiing not really become the center of my entire universe for over 13 years on our national team.
So for those of us who aren't speed demons, talk to me about not feeling the terror that I even do when I'm watching it on television.
Okay, I gotta stop you right there. Everybody feels terror. Everybody feels fear. If they don't, or they say they don't, they're lying.
So, fair enough.
First and foremost, I actually, you know what? I'm not a daredevil and I'm not an adrenaline junkie. Never have been, never will be. However, I am very comfortable being uncomfortable. I
Okay.
like the challenge of trying to figure that out when I don't understand something, or I can't quite get it, or it's making me feel an emotion that's very powerful. And my very first time doing a downhill was in Mont Saint Anne, Quebec. I was 14 years old and I was just starting. It was the first real downhill for that age. And I was terrified, to say the least. I was crying. I was shaking. My vision had narrowed. My body, like I had like just cold sweats. Like I was as scared as you can get. My coach literally and figuratively pushed me out of the start gate. I made maybe 4 gates and then I went out. I'm on the side of the hill and slowly I started to breathe fully again. My vision started to open. I started to unclench every muscle in my body. And I saw the athletes going by one at a time. And they were my friends. They were people I knew. And I was like, oh, it doesn't look so hard. Okay, I can see it now. And then I started to go, wait a sec. What was that emotion that I just felt that brought me to my knees? And it was the first time I really faced fear head on. And I won't say I overcame it because I barely survived and I only did it because I got forced. But that's where my addiction came in, is I wanted to understand that emotion. I wanted to understand something that powerful. How could I harness it? How could I understand it? How could I manage it so it didn't manage me? So I wasn't fear. Fear was something I felt. And then I could walk beside it. And that has served me really well in life.
You speak in a way that I have heard lots of athletes express, and that is that emotion is sort of set to the side, that they aren't necessarily at one with the emotion, that the emotions are over here, that they're very much able to compartmentalize what's going on. Is that kind of what you're talking about, or is it something different?
Very much so. And I think the more you understand emotion and can examine it from different angles, the healthier you can be around emotion. Because I've learned, and this is mental health across all facets, right? They're really trying to change the language that it's like, I'm not anxious. No, I'm feeling anxious. This moment is causing me anxiety. Changing our language around emotion is exceptionally powerful. And that's also why language matters so much when you're raising the next generation or you're raising your kids, because our words matter. As you know, PJ, in the industry we're in, words matter. Whether it's speaking to the server who's giving you that beer right now or that coffee we talked about, which we're too far apart to do that right now, but the way you interact with them will affect how they go home and how they interact with their partners later in the day or sleep tonight. The way you talk to your kids is how they will talk to their kids. Words matter. And communication is connection. Without connection, we're not communicating. And emotions, life is all about emotions. I really love vacations. I love going on vacations. I always want to plan a vacation. And then somebody said to me, it's like, well, what do you want on vacation? What's the emotion you're looking for on vacation? And then I started to identify ways to bring that emotion into my everyday life. And I was like, oh, wait, I can kind of live on vacation if that's the lens you're looking through. So it really is just trying to find language around emotion to have that mental toughness while also holding on to your mental health.
Is there an aspect of your personality that is, or do you subscribe to a theory of sort of Pollyanna everything, or are you realistic about things and just find a way to be able to cope with whatever's going on? And I know you have lots of clients in the communications realm, and you're doing lots of work in corporate world as well as sports, as well as all kinds of other places. So how do you help people manage that aspect?
Like manage their own language around emotions or their own anxieties?
Well, I guess helping them make the connection, because for lots of people, I remember as a coach, and I was a coach for a very long time, and certainly keeners. I wasn't a coach really of super competitive athletes, but nevertheless, I have had former skaters in their adulthood that, you meet randomly and they say, that thing you told me when I was 14 made all the difference. And I'm, of course, it makes me just shocked that it would have that kind of an effect, but also grateful that I didn't say something dumb when they were 14. I helped them make a connection to whatever it was.
I think the simplest answer to that very big question is really storytelling.
Yep.
I think if we can anchor lessons through storytelling, it makes a connection for people, especially for youth. And I mean, there's the technical aspect of sport, right? The how and the way to move and the mechanics of all that kind of stuff. And there are definitely people who understand some sports more than others, and they have that eye for the root cause of an effect, right? Of let's whittle it down and let's break it down. But I think the communication and the emotional side, which is also very much what I'm doing now, whether I'm in sport or whether I'm working communications with the corporate world and with leaders in that sector. So much of it is just telling stories that also help to educate, to connect us, to find a way through, to give us that anchor, I suppose, right? And so much about athletes, and whether I'm working with leaders or athletes, I really try and validate before I problem solve. And that's one of the many communication lessons I try and reiterate when I'm working with groups, is to validate somebody's emotion first, to validate what they're feeling, to validate what they're seeing. Because, okay, I hear you, I understand you, this is what you're going through, this is your vantage point, this is what's going on. I feel, and I think I understand the space you're in. Now, are we ready to move on to problem solving? And I think having that step, which can happen in seconds, can make all the difference, because then you set the stage for learning. You set the stage for problem solving. And there's somebody on the other side who's receptive to it. Whereas, go ahead.
No, you go.
Like if you have a kid, for example, having a meltdown with fear. I mean, I see it all the time on the ski hill.
I'm sure.
They're scared, right? And fear has a way of being very obvious. And they might be ready for the step they're about to take. They might have even done it before, but for whatever reason, that moment, fear has taken over. And so validating the fear, giving them a moment to find their breath, to settle their nerves, to settle their muscles, to open up their vision again. They might just need 2 minutes, and then they're ready to tackle that challenge again. But if you jump right to problem solving, people tend to shut down.
Yeah, for sure. So I love the idea of storytelling. And one of the things that I think is where we're maybe looking for a solution is the growth of grassroots sport. We're Canadians, and there are lots of sports that are competing for children, really,
Yeah.
to join them. So in general, though, I think there's also been a bit of a shift in the attitudes of parents along the way, who maybe don't see the value of sport in the same way that my mom and dad did. They put me in skating, and you were going to do your best, win or lose, mostly lose in my case. And you were going to
For
learn
everybody's case, even the winners, we all lose whether we win.
yeah, for sure. And you needed to learn how to do that with grace, and you needed to learn lots of different lessons, work ethic, all the rest of it. So what is the story that we should be telling people to help them understand the value of sport and to get them to go and enroll their children in something?
I think my answer to that is really the idea of mental toughness versus mental health.
Okay.
In the realm of sport, you can really learn mental toughness. I hear a lot of people saying things like, oh, I have to coach every kid differently. Like nobody's tough anymore. And I'm like, I call BS. I see some incredibly tough kids, and they are learning to fall down, pick themselves back up, and do it again, and to refocus and to reset. And when I look at my son who, doesn't make a team or does make a team, or his mental resilience and his physical resilience is so high because of sport, that when he didn't make a team last year, it's like, okay, it's not about winning or losing. It's about what's the lesson. What's the lesson?
Yep.
Okay, approaching development, approaching toughness from the lesson and from the mind, like the growth mindset, it is a completely different space. It's not here's your, sure, here's a ribbon, and we want participation. We want everybody to show up. But there
Absolutely.
also is some hard lessons, like facing fear, facing anxiety, facing fear of failure, facing fear of being judged, facing all these things that you feel when you go into a job interview, that you feel when you're going to put yourself out there with a resume or hoping to get an application even looked at. All these things you're facing. And if you are only facing them in a very visceral way for the first time when you're 18 or older, that's a lot harder.
Yeah.
But if you're facing that again and again, you have different social interactions. You have to engage with new groups of people from different provinces, perhaps they're coming together. You're having different cultures, differences, all these things you're navigating that are outside of just a bubble of your home and school. And man, the learning that goes on in a space that I feel is really becoming safer and safer and safer as we're having these conversations, and stronger as we're having these conversations. Every time I hear a parent go, wow, my kid really struggled with this or this, I'm like, wow, what an amazing learning opportunity.
You know what? Preach, sister. That's exactly right. Because when I think about it, I used to say to my skaters, there are really, none of you are bad skaters. You may have had a bad performance. And guess what? The sun comes out tomorrow. So it gives you a chance to really examine what went right, what went wrong, and what you could maybe do differently in order to mitigate the challenge that you faced in that performance, because you're going to have to do it again. I mean, your sport is about wiping out. Mine is about falling down. And then what do? And you're right. So do you have a moment where you felt that you learned a lesson that you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
Oh, yeah. Oh, so many. It's hard to pick one. But I'll tell one that really resonates when I speak with young athletes, especially young women who I think don't realize how many male and female, how many athletes, how many humans, let's just say humans, feel self-doubt, feel uncertain about what path they want to take. So I was 19 years old. I was 20. I just turned 20. I was on the World Cup circuit. I'd already won 2 World Junior medals at the World Championships. And I was racing World Cup and I was sucking. I was 6 seconds behind the leaders, which in ski racing, that is an eternity. That's like barely leaving the start when somebody's finishing. Not really, but kind of. And I had a new boyfriend who is now my husband, and life was good. I'm like, why? Kayaker, David Ford, and 5-time Olympic world champion. And he was just so shiny and handsome. And I just had a moment where I was like, why am I putting myself through this struggle, this grind, this really hard thing when life's pretty good? I was good in school. I was good in all those things. Had a great boyfriend, all these things. So I'm like, you know what? I think I'm done. I think I'm ready to quit. And because those 6 seconds between me and the leader, I knew where 2 of those seconds were. The other 4 seconds, I couldn't even conceptualize where they were. And that was hard to wrap my brain around that challenge. So I said, okay, this might be the end of my road. And I'm at peace with that. So I told my boyfriend, I told our sports psychologist, because she was a safe space, and she was like, yep, that's between us. I recommend you spend some time with this before you share it publicly, and have it be your decision. And I said, awesome. Well, I'm heading into a home World Cup, Lake Louise. I might as well enjoy this to the fullest. I might as well have the best weekend that's just for me. I'm not skiing for anybody else. I'm not skiing for a result. I'm skiing for me. And guess where those other 4 seconds were?
Wow.
In that space.
Interesting.
It was bringing that childlike play back into my life. That was what unleashed my talent. That was what unleashed my skill. I was trying so hard, I was going backwards. And that resonated, and that made me go, oh, I have to be childlike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have to find the love for it again. So when I'm going to turn my attention now to your career as a broadcaster. When you're looking at an athlete in the starting gate or wherever that they're competing, Can you see that quality in their performance or in their eyes as they're about to start? Is there anything that says, oh yeah, I recognize that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think that there are some people, if I know them really well, I can see when they're in that space. But that space of performance is so different from person to person. And I remember being an athlete in that space, in the start gate, and later on hearing people talking, like my physio saying, oh yeah, I totally knew she wasn't going to be good today. Oh, I totally knew she was going to be good today. Oh, I totally knew she was in the right headspace or not. And like, easy to say after the fact.
Sure.
And I remember thinking that, and really wrapping my brain around, really nothing matters at all except for the start gate to the end gate.
Yep.
And in the same way, when you get on the ice and you get off the ice for a performance, that's all that matters. The world could blow up outside. You could have total devastation. You could have a lost family member, but you get on the ice and that can be your safe space. That's what matters. And you can just sink your teeth into. And I really believe that athletes that can have that kind of resilience, that no matter what happens out there, they know that they can own this space, own what they've trained. That's what is unique. And I've seen every personality be a champion. From Laura Goot, who's giggly when she was young, less when she's older, but she was giggly and joking and loud and singing in the start gate, to a Renata Goitia, who's much more serious in the start gate. And you have every personality type. You have every personality type be a champion. And I think that's fabulous.
I think it's pretty amazing. So, you're grown up, clearly, and now you're on the board of directors of Alpine Canada and of WinSport. You get a chance to see sport. And at WinSport, it's not just downhill skiing. There's all kinds of different facilities at the park. You're getting a chance to sort of see sport still at the youth stage. I know Alpine Canada also has, very senior and accomplished athletes, but what are you noticing? Are you noticing more people coming to Calgary to get involved in sport, or what are your observations?
Grassroots sport, I'm seeing a lot of engagement. When COVID hit, for example, the ski racing program hit max numbers, and they've maintained those numbers since then.
Really?
Yes. WinSport, which they do a ton of summer program community outreach. So they're at the Oval, they're at they're in Canmore for cross country, they're mountain biking, there's downhill skiing, there's all kinds of sports and activities to engage that really probably expand beyond what many even realize for community outreach programs. The numbers are really high. People want to move. People want to be healthy. People want to have social interactions and connections. And I think that pricing it right, hitting the timelines, hitting accessibility, having your messaging really be aligned, because I see organizations thrive when there's trust.
Yes.
And so often, if you try and exert leadership without trust, it won't work. Whereas if you've built trust and you've built a community and you deliver on promises made, then people buy in. They want that. They're craving that. And I really think that it's always evolving. It's always nuanced, and it always has to have really engaged personnel and governance to ensure that it thrives. And I see that. I see so much care and attention being given in sport world that it just kills me when I don't see it. And I have to sometimes hold my tongue. But when I do see it, I just want to lift that up and do everything I can to ensure that that person, that program, that momentum finds a way to continue. And the governance side of it has really been insightful for me to learn a lot about how you do that.
You know what's so interesting? I'm going to get you to respond to a couple of comments that were made in earlier podcasts. One from Malcolm Kelly, who's a well-known journalist, and he runs a sports journalism program at Centennial College here in Toronto. And he talked about the fact that back in the day when he and I were kids, that in the summertime you did swimming, and in the wintertime you did hockey or figure skating and maybe a little bit of skiing. And that those were kind of the choices, and that now in 2025, we have so many choices. I mean, take a look at just even the huge increase in disciplines within skiing, that weren't there back in the day. Do you think that that's having an influence? Are the different sports trying to compete for the same number of participants?
Definitely competition. And I think that's where that trust connection comes in, that you have to really value your community and you have to treat them with respect and integrity. And you have to be transparent. And I think that those qualities have to be anchored in just the values that exist across everything you do, across every platform of communication, and in the moment of when you're actually interacting with a kid doing sport. And I think that is really important because it is absolutely a competition for attention. We are in an attention economy, whether it's how many seconds we can hold you looking at your phone, your reel, whether we can grab you and actually get you on a bike ride, whether it's downhill biking, road biking, enduro biking. There's so many options. As we said, there's so many. So, and also trying to find a way now as a parent to find a way to communicate to parents with some semblance of confidence and clarity. The clarity is a hard one right now with our situations, especially when you're in, my son loves hockey. And so it is a linear sport, which means there's a lot of judgment that happens. And the comments that you hear from parents and the understanding of basins in logic of what they're seeing versus what they think. And it's fascinating across the board. So I find that a really, I think even more so, that's where communication matters, and transparency matters, and consistency matters. And from a governance level, you really have to train your coaches. You have to train your organization, because things are going to happen and you're going to have bad apples, period. Like just to be clear, bad things can happen and you're going to just have some bad apples. And so how do you identify them? How do you deal with them? And how do you ensure that there is safety and integrity in how that situation is managed? And that is what I care about. I don't care about a bad apple or a coach who is still stuck from 40 years ago and doesn't understand the difference between a bag skate or hey, you need to be fit to be good at hockey. Let's do a hard skate today, and actually motivate with the growth mindset rather than a punishment mindset. Completely same workout, same effort, completely different spaces to come from. And that doesn't bother me if you come across a bad apple. It's how does the governance manage that?
Absolutely. Another comment that I'd love you to sort of weigh in on is Scott Russell, your friend of mine, legendary CBC broadcaster.
Love that man.
He's now chancellor at Nipissing University. And he feels very strongly that sports should be mandatory for kids bottom to top in terms of school. And that would do a lot to increase participation in grassroots sport. What do you think about that?
Well, I think if you aren't learning the building blocks of movement when you're young, it's very hard to feel confident taking on a physical sport later in life. I had some friends who were like, oh no, I'm artsy, I don't do sports. And now they're 35 going, uh-oh, my body's falling apart. I need to move and I don't know how to move. And movement doesn't have to be in sport, doesn't have to be, oh, you're either going for the NHL or it's not worth doing. You're either going for the Olympics or it's not worth doing. We've lost the plot if that's the message any Canadian is getting, because it's about health for life, movement for life, community for life, engagement for life. And if that is the basis of how our sports system is functioning, we're good to go, but it's not. There's competing aspects. They're trying to compete for attention, for money, for value, all kinds of things. And I come back to your average Canadian thinks that the government should be paying for our athletes and paying for Olympic sport and covering gym and all these things in schools. And they're not. We're functioning so far below the bare minimum. It is astounding what Canadian athletes are still accomplishing.
Agreed.
astounding,
Agreed.
including the schools trying to deliver any semblance of gym and PE and extracurricular sporting activities that also try and take into account you have different interests, different levels of skill, and just trying to make it about some participation. We need that. We need to move and be healthy. So we need our government to step up.
Yeah.
We need communities to ask for it and demand it. It's always easy to demand, oh, our hospitals need more money. They do,
Yeah.
absolutely. But so do our physical education and the world of sport. It needs money to be sustainable and to ensure healthy space and a safe space.
Because let's face it, if kids adopt healthy lifestyles from the time that they're very young, there are fewer hospital visits for them as they age. So it actually ends up being a cost savings measure when it's all said and done.
And if you look at it from an economic impact, sport is tourism, right? The outdoor
Yeah.
economy in Canada garners almost as much as the oil and gas sector. Like if you look at it as an economy, even just from tourism, if you look at sport from a different lens and you tie in tourism to sport, it becomes a no-brainer.
Yeah.
The USGA, so the Golf Association in the United States, they just shared a stat that 1 out of every 75 jobs in the US is positively impacted by the golf industry.
Who knew? That's wild.
And so
Yeah.
quantifying sport in these ways just changes also the narrative so that I think our governing officials, our governments, our funding bodies can understand the value add that is sport, the value add, and every dollar you spend into engagement at youth sports, you're getting a return.
Yes, you
A
are.
big return.
For sure. I want to talk a little bit. We just got a couple of minutes left, and I want to talk about your other ventures on Team Canada's as a photographer, and you're also a videographer. Talk to me about representing Canada as a photographer. Your work is beautiful, and it's not just sports, it's all kinds of everything. So tell me a little bit about that.
So I've always been an artist at heart. Like I said, I was not an adrenaline junkie and daredevil at heart. I was an academic and an artist. Those were very much at my core. I was great in the sciences and the math, but I also love the arts. And I cut lawns and saved my pennies to buy camera equipment and a full darkroom by the time I was 15 years old that I set up in my dad's closet in his office. Because I loved that artistic medium, and I had some amazing influences very early, from National Geographic to Roberta Bonder, a Pulitzer Prize winner, and that really ignited a fire in me that went parallel to my sport. And I remember in high school, I sat down with my guidance counselor, and I had been pulled out for 3 years of enrichment learning. So I was considered a student that was fast tracking to something big, right? And I sat down with this high school because I was transitioning back into the normal stream of high school to get on to university. And he sat me down, I was like, okay, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, well, I really love skiing and photography. And his response, leave that for the stupid kids. Now, what are you actually going to do?
You're kidding me.
Not kidding.
Oh, dear.
And, well, I took that as a challenge.
As you would.
So, and I got a new guidance counselor. I ended up working with a gentleman named Ron Pecker, who was amazing, and he was fabulous. So I was like, okay, well, you're not my human. I'm going to find somebody else. And my life has been successful on every metric that you can measure it by. And I am beyond grateful that I've followed the path that I followed, because I've been successful financially, emotionally, physically. And now watching my kid thrive with that example is, I could not be more grateful. But now, yes, I work with Sony International as an industry advisor, how to merge, because as you know, being a broadcaster, you're working in every sector of every platform of communication, whether it's visual, whether it's language, whether it's the written word. And I love all of it. And so I really try and work, even if I'm working with a company, is how do you align all of your communication and ensure that you're building that trust through that alignment. And my visual work that I do, whether it's video or photo, I have a passion for it. And I just love working with people. Somebody asked me and they're like, well, what do you like to photograph and film? I'm like, people. No, it's my answer, people. I'm not a landscape photographer. I love our landscape. Canada's beautiful. But I like that engagement. I like community.
Those moments. Stories. We're back to storytelling. Okay, last word is yours, Kelly VanderBeek. What do you want to tell people out there about the value of sport?
Move. Just move. Doing something is better than doing nothing. And movement is connection. Movement is a way to engage with our surroundings, engage with our community. And sometimes it just takes that first step. Whether that first step is looking up an organization or whether it's literally going out your door and taking that step, just move.
You know what? That is fantastic. I'm going to take that with me along the way. Kelly VanderBeek, Olympian, World Cup medalist, corporate communicator, champion of all things human. I want to thank you for joining me.
You're a great human, PJ. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. And to everybody watching, go move.
We'll talk soon. Bye for now. Well, that's it for another episode of Sports Clamor. I hope you'll join us for every episode that comes along. This was Kelly VanderBeek, and make sure you subscribe to us on Apple, on Spotify, or come watch us on YouTube. That's it for me. I'm PJ Kwong for Community. Bye for now.